Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to 22 Panels. My guest today is Tucker Stone, who is, what's your official title? I know it's PR something.
The title there is Executive Director of Communications and Marketing.
Okay, so not PR something, Executive Director of Communications and Marketing at Fantagraphics, and you've been in that role for a couple of years now. Were you at Fantagraphics
I,
longer than that, or
no, it actually hasn't been. I think it's just now coming up on 2 years. It's getting pretty close to 2 years.
just now coming? You cut out for a second, which means that the recording got it, and I didn't. Just coming up on 2 years, is that what you said?
Yeah, it's just coming up on 2 years right now.
Right, because I actually remember when you got the job, just because I was in the middle of working with Jack Cohen to uh, book Emil Ferris,
Okay.
and and then I was the one that wound up telling Emil that Jack wasn't there when we switched over to just booking on our own, because Emil and I were already like we'd
Mm-hmm.
trade messages about Cubs games,
Uh-huh.
but she was going through Jack just because she also gets busy, and I'm like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, no, I don't know who has Jack's job yet. It's just like Jack's not there anymore. I'm
Mhm.
like, not according to the beat,
Yeah.
who
There
keeps
was like
track
a
of these things pretty well.
there was like a whole month, I think, where there wasn't actually a person who was doing the job. I mean, there was
Oh,
someone doing it. There was people filling in, obviously,
of course.
but Jack was actually not there, and I was not actually there. So it was like a
Right.
gap. But she was still. But yeah, so it's coming up on 2 years now.
Coming up on 2 years. And uh, I have two questions. You can answer them in whichever order. Just because we just read Copra over
Hmm.
the last six episodes of our standard
Hmm.
weekly podcast, or actually eight episodes, eight volumes of Copra, right?
Hmm.
Um, I know that you've been around in comics because you're thanked in every volume of Copra, so you've been around.
Hmm.
Um, so my two opening questions that you can answer in whichever order is like, what's your story that brought you to where you are? And then in 5 minutes or less, describe like what you do because I love talking to people in all realms of comics and recently talked to David Hyde, who does similar stuff, but on a
Hmm.
different level. Um, but like you're not one of the jobs that's like obvious in terms of, oh, he draws the comic. Oh, she writes
Hmm.
the comic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, that's where we'll start.
So I mean, it's kind of long, I guess. But the short version of it is that I originally started as a guy. I was a blogger online, and I blogged about comics, and then I got hired by Comixology before Comixology had an app when it wasn't a
Right.
Comixology's original. You may know this, your readers, listeners may know this.
Website.
Comixology was originally just like a pull list kind of
Right.
situation for retailers, and they hired people like me to do columns for them. And so I did like the superhero kind of focused column, the kind of newsy type thing. And I wrote weekly essays for them. And Karen Green, who's in
Yeah, I
charge
was
of
about to say.
Columbia University's collection, she wrote Adventures in Academia. Joe McCullough, who's been around comics forever, Jog the Blog, he wrote about really weird movies. And then there are a couple other things. I did like a radio show with some gaming website where I would go through the list of the comics that were out that week. I've never
Okay.
met anyone who heard this thing, but I was paid to do this, and then I just kind of
Okay.
stopped doing it at one point, and nobody ever told me to. They just stopped paying me, but they never complained. I always wondered who listened to that, but if anyone did, because it didn't make sense why they would pay me to do that. It was so who would play that? But anyway, so I interviewed a guy who had just opened a store in Brooklyn called Bergen Street Comics. And I really liked talking to him. He and I had the same sense of humor, the same kind of irritations. And he was getting ready to scale up his business. He and his wife were doing all of the work all of the time. And so I came in and I got I was a little older to be doing that job. It was very much like a teenage boy's job, to like work in a comic book store and like, you know, alphabetize the new releases. But I liked him,
Right.
and I didn't like my day job at the time. I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't what I wanted to do.
Right.
Um, so I worked for him, and that changed my life. That's how I met Fife, who worked there as well. That's why I was there when he came up with Cobra, when he came up with Death Zone, when he was doing weird shit, pitching things. Mike Caballero worked there, who now his books are being like optioned by DreamWorks. He's doing like a kids cartoonist. Eisner nominee for his Image Comics work. Casey Gonzalez worked there. She's now like the development head at Tiny Onion, working for James Tinian.
Okay.
Matt Seneca, who's incredible comics critic, also cartoonist, and he worked there as well. Tom Adams to Amy Adams, they were the bosses. I eventually became what's called managing partner at that store, so it
Yeah.
did become kind of an adult job. And I started freelancing for publishers. So I started doing work where I would go to shows like Book Expo. So not um, consumer facing shows, business to business shows where you would go and talk, you go and fill in for a publisher to meet with book buyers and sales reps and that sort of thing. And I worked with a company called No Brow. No Brow at the time was they weren't
Right.
in the U.S. They were a British only company, and they had
Okay.
just gotten going. They'd just gotten going with Luke Pearson. I think they had one Hilda book at the time, and they got U.S. distribution. They had no U.S. employees though, so they would pay me to go to shows, and I would talk about their books at their shows because we sold a. We used to. I think Chris Pitzer from Ad House, and he was
I
very
don't know if I've met him. I
yeah.
know of him.
Yeah, so Chris was a big help to me because Chris was running this like funky distribution thing where he would
Right.
have like comics that didn't have distribution and were like weird, and you would order them from him and he would go and get them out of his garage and then he would mail them to you and he would
Sounds a
sell them
little
as
bit
well.
like what we haven't managed to actually have him on the podcast yet, but we've traded emails with Austin English and
Oh yeah.
Domino.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very much like
And
that.
I don't know for certain if he's getting them out of his garage because I haven't talked to him yet, but it
I
feels like a very similar operation.
I doubt it's a garage because he is a New York City guy. I don't think Austin is at garage having level. It's probably a storage unit.
Right.
I don't know that for sure. Maybe Austin has a brownstone with a garage, which would be
Right.
really impressive. But yeah, it's a similar kind of thing. And then what happened is Nobrow had reached out to Chris and tried to pay Chris to go do some of this work. And Chris was like, and Chris, I think was a lawyer or something, and I can't remember what his day job was. He just retired recently, but he was like, no, I'm like a real person. Like like I'm not interested in $200 to go do a show. But there's this guy Tucker, and
Right.
he buys a lot of your books. At that time, we probably were buying more Nobrow books than anybody else because they were so unique at the time. They didn't have distribution, and so they hired me to be their guy. And then over time, I got to know those dudes. There's two guys who ran the company who had founded it. They were like college roommates, and they and I got along pretty well. And so they asked me to leave the store and become the sales and marketing director for the United States to handle all of their stuff there. They wanted to incorporate and open a Nobrow US, but they needed to do that with the government. You have to have US employees. So
Right.
I became both their first employee and also their legal reason for existence.
Right.
I kept working at the store because I love the store. The store was my life. Tom was my life. Amy was my life. Fife, all that stuff. And then eventually Tom's wife was and is incredibly successful, and she's this person who I always thought about it, and we would have these parties at the store, and there I'm not going to name names, but there would be cartoonists who would behave in this way, this very the king shit of fuck mountain. I'm sorry, these big. I'm a big deal, and they would be very
Right.
like kind of
Right.
condescending to her in the classic
Right.
like lady at the comic shop place, that kind of thing. And I was always struck. I was like, this lady she was like in charge of at the time she was like in charge of all of the major advertising brands in like Asia and Europe.
Right.
She had
So
this
you're sitting there thinking, this shop exists because she allows it to exist.
Yeah, but it was also one of those things where it was like this, she could throw weight around and she just
Right.
never did. And she never
Right.
seemed to ever give. I mean, I would harbor petty resentments over every imagined slight. And then she would have some like, some, I don't know, guy who had like a popular web cartoon for like a week, like talk to her like, hey, you dumb broad, you know? And I was just like, she could like buy your family and then
Right.
have them killed in the street, you know?
Right.
That's maybe over the top, but it was just she,
Right.
I love them, I love them. But over time, like it was like she was like she can't be here, she can't live in the United States. She's like constantly having to go to Switzerland and China and Spain, all these places.
Right.
And it became a thing where it was like you have this store, and it's like she just can't keep coming back and doing this. And Tom loves his wife.
Right.
Like at a certain point, you have to be like, okay, this thing has run its course.
Mm, right.
And I had a child by then, and I was like, I just need a job. Like I can't like keep doing living like this. But anyway, so that was what happened. And then I got headhunted away by a company called Ingram. Ingram is the
I
biggest book
know Ingram.
distributor. Yeah, biggest book. And so uh,
Like if you desperately want to have only one account, Ingram is the one to have.
yeah,
But because of that, they also have often the lowest discounts unless you're like Barnes and Noble
yeah.
or
I mean, they're a
a school
monolithic.
district.
Yeah, they're a monolithic company. Um,
Right.
but they brought me on to do library marketing because of all the work. Nobrow's business had changed
Ah,
while I was there.
library marketing for comics or library
For
marketing
everything.
in okay.
Um, the what
I mean,
happened?
still, you're probably like we probably just cracked part of the code for how libraries got into comics. I'm imagining because like
Oh, okay.
that's an. I mean, you can be humble, and I'm certain that it's not just you, but like
Oh
those
no.
of us who pay attention have noticed a massive shift in how libraries treat comics over the last 2 decades or so.
No, that's I mean I definitely was that's part of the reason I got that job was because of this giant sea change in the way that comics are kind of purchased and collected and organized.
Right,
What had happened is that Nobrow's business had really gone where the money was, and Nobrow, meaning the children's stuff, had
right,
just dominated. Like the amount of money you could make of a children's material in terms of picture books and graphic novels for that age group just completely changed. And part of that was library sales, also
right,
gift sales, and not to discredit the direct market, but that those numbers weren't growing the way that library sales were. And so when I went to Ingram, it was to focus on children's and library marketing for adult brands. But there was also this thing. It was like, well, Tucker's the comics guy, and so I
right.
would be what's called like the client manager for any of the comics publishers we distributed. Um,
Okay,
and so that would mean people like Uncivilized Press with Tom Kaczynski,
right.
based where I live now in Minnesota.
In Minnesota.
Yeah, Spike Trotman from Iron
I was about
Circus.
to say Spike and Iron Circus are exclusive to Ingram now.
Yep. And then at the time, Rain, Rain, 2D Cloud, um, the Floating World, and then various other. I mean, I know I'm forgetting some. Street Noise was one that came around towards the end of my time there. But
Oh,
so
they
I
do some
and
good stuff too.
Tune Books, obviously, because that was part of what happened next
Right.
was. But so I worked there for years, and that's why I left New York. I left New York to come to Minnesota because the office I worked with was primarily in Minnesota.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't realize Ingram was in Minnesota.
yeah, it's the Consortium branch. Consortium was an independent distributor that over the years got purchased by various companies and then eventually purchased by Ingram. When I was working at Nobrow is when that change happened. When Consortium was
Okay.
our distributor, and then they were purchased by Ingram, and Ingram became our distributor. They still keep the Consortium brand. That's still considered the office, considered the name,
Yeah.
but it's no different from PGW, which is out in
Right.
California, and then Two Rivers, which is in New York. And then of course the Ingram hive mind of everything, which is in Tennessee. So yeah, so I worked for them, working on. So I worked within this kind of comics, and it was, I'd had this chance to be sales and marketing and publicity when I was at Nobrow, where he just was me, and eventually it was me and another guy. But then going to Ingram, my job became, well, you're working with a guy who has a comics publisher that has one person working for him. And then you've got another comics publisher who has 8 people working for them. And so they
Right.
have different needs. They're at different levels. Some people can like stay up all night, like dealing with tracing trade reviews. And, some people have enough of a budget to hire a David Hyde as a freelance publicist, or they have a
Right.
publicist on staff. Some people are just living to keep up with orders,
Right.
and they make the product and they don't really optimize it or whatever. They don't worry about the
Right.
metadata. They don't worry about chasing reviews. They don't, so it was always about, what are you going to do with these guys
Or
together?
even if they worry about it, they don't have the bandwidth to do all
Right.
of those things.
Yeah. So, and they're all, and some are in completely different places. I mean, I remember there's this one publisher, and they're still there, Dinpa, and Dinpa has a porn line of manga porn line, and like that stuff is almost like, I don't want to say it's automated because they have a lot of work they have to do, but it is a thing. Like you don't do any of the things that another publisher might do for manga porn. You don't go and
Right.
you don't send it to Publishers Weekly. You don't try to
No.
get somebody, you don't try to get Tad from 22 Panels to interview the
I mean, I
people who make
might.
it. But it's
I'm. I
obviously you
mean,
might, but you've got, it's more of a
the one
business.
time I had somebody reach out to me that falls into that category, I did not say no because I wasn't willing to talk to them. I said I said no because like when I did my due diligence, because there is going to be more due diligence on something like that, particularly
Hmm.
because I'm a teacher. If I have a conversation like that, I want it to be a good conversation.
Hmm.
I have mixed feelings, but tend to be sex positive. So like whatever. But like when I was doing my due diligence, the word I got from a handful of people that had interacted with this person and or published this person was that they were really, really not a particularly good person, and therefore there was a really good chance that I wasn't going to get anything that I was willing to publish. And then
Hmm.
I'm sitting there going, "Yeah, no, that's not time that I'm willing to waste."
Hmm.
Like having a real conversation about the place that erotica and porn has in publishing in whatever would be a fascinating conversation to me. Just tossing it out there. Should any of the porn publishers be listening? But that's where we go back to Tucker. I'm the weirdest podcast in comics because
Hmm.
I don't have a focus. I have a I love all comics. Let's talk about what makes the medium cool.
See that, and I think that's, I mean, just to like nitpick, I'd say what I'm framing it less is, it's less about you and
Oh yeah, no, no, no.
why should a porn publisher,
They don't
because
need to.
that was, I mean, and because that was like actually part of the that was always going to be part of the job, is that you have this, I think you mentioned this earlier, like that idea of like, if you're going to do it, why not do it for real, right? If you're going to
Right,
do the notes, right, do them all the way. And so
right,
with the thing, you'd be on the phone with somebody and you'd be like, and I have in my head, like, oh, we're going to check these boxes. This is what we need to do. This is what you should do because this is what worked for X, Y, and Z, right? But when
right.
it comes to something like that, the guy's like, no, it's not
It's the niche of the niche. The people who are going to buy it know about it.
exactly. And it's almost
Yeah,
like my job, I optimizing my business is not optimizing my publicity. It's optimizing my
right,
production schedule. It's
right,
optimizing my delivery schedule. It's
right,
optimizing my packing carton schedule. Like
right.
that's where my sales increase when I'm
No,
sending people.
a conversation on 22 panels isn't going to move their needle.
Or any,
Um,
but even like one of those things, like, would it even move the needle if you got him on NPR's Planet Money?
no,
Like that would be
no.
brag worthy, but it is, but it are
Right,
is that
right.
actually gonna,
So the literally the only reason to do it is if they feel like doing it, not from a
that and author retention?
regardless of who they're talking to.
Yeah, and I think that's always like, that's a big part of it too. Is if you have somebody who's a big deal, um, sometimes those people need to have actual things to do, and they
Right,
want to know that they're working with somebody who is taking the time to find those places for them to go, whether or not it results in an actual growth of audience is
Right.
superfluous. Author retention is a real, that's part of the job. Um, but I loved working there because it was fascinating. It's so fascinating.
It
Um,
sounds fascinating.
yeah, because you get to see like all the ways. Because the other thing too is my ones to ones were often comics and children's book publishers, but you would also watch how the other client manager, because we're all very close, small office,
Right.
and so you'd see how another client manager is dealing with Haymarket or at the time
Right.
Akashic, these publishers who have, Akashic Books was fascinating to me because Akashic was this publisher that had that book Go the Fuck to Sleep. And Go the
Ah,
Fuck to
I love
Sleep,
that book.
it
Have you
sold one.
have
So
I have the audiobook.
yeah, so it's one of these
Sam
things.
fucking Jackson
Yeah,
reads.
it's one of these things that sold I mean, it's left the realm of a regular book. It is a cultural object that moves
Right.
you. And so to watch how a publisher changes based off having this one object that outperforms everything else that exists and becomes like a foundational part of somebody's income, it's just fascinating to see that happen. You're not going to get to see you will get a version of that if you work at a publisher, but you'll only get that one version. And to see
Right.
all these different people and the way they function, to see how a mission driven publisher functions from the inside, who's not driven as much by profit or is a nonprofit, is basically driven by accomplishment. It was fascinating. It was really fascinating. I was really lucky to have that position. Um, anyway, and it gave me relationships, and one of those relationships was Francoise Millet, the wife of Art Spiegelman, art director of New Yorker magazine.
I have met her
Yeah,
mostly because Art was probably talking too long with me and another guy at the end of a day at CXC. So she came and played Time to Go.
yes, she's very. I mean, she's the real deal in that regard.
Yeah, yeah.
She and I got to know each other, and she had sold Tune to a company called Astra Publishing House, and they were a company that was buying different. They had their own line, and then they also have a couple of imprints, and they wanted to do comics. They wanted to work with her. They bought that, and then she has a full time job. She's still the New Yorker person. She's making
Right.
books. She's Francois Millet. Um, and so they said we got
No,
to hire somebody.
she's another one of my white whales, and I think it's more likely that I'll get Art than Francoise on the podcast, just because she not only doesn't need me, but she has like so much to do at any
Yeah,
given time.
she's got a lot. Um, but so she called me up, and it was one of the best. It was one of the best days of my life. It was one of the best phone calls I ever had because it's like your phone rings, and then you're on the phone with somebody of that importance who you respect that much, and
Right.
it's cool to like know her and have worked with her. And she was talking to me and telling me why she, and then she kind of got around to it and said she wanted me to come and work for her and work for Astra. And so I had no intention of leaving Ingram. I really liked working there. I'd moved across the country to work there. I love my boss. She was a fascinating woman. She's actually just retiring this year after like 40 years, 30 years. Um, but Francoise made me this offer, and it was too cool to not take. So I became the executive editor of Tune, and that's what I was doing up until a few years ago. Um, so working with Ben Sears and Frank Camiso and Noah Van Sciver and Ivan Brunetti, and just making books, making things, and getting to see, because that was the one part of work, Coper notwithstanding, that I had never done, to actually call somebody on the phone that you like, start talking to them, figure out how to pay them,
Right.
deal with their agent, and
Right.
then get a contract, and then go ahead and start making a book. And it was awesome. It was such a cool experience to do all that.
Lots of great books at Tune too.
Yeah, I mean
I mean, again, The Educator in Me just
yeah, I mean it's fascinating. Like, and working and seeing how Francoise makes a book, because by that point in my life I had seen how people edit. I had seen how people make books. No one does it like Sure. No one does it like her. No one. And I do think that the way she does it is, I mean, in my personal feeling, is probably the best way to do it. It's also the hardest. It's the most
I
demanding.
mean, I obviously haven't seen it firsthand, but I was at her talk her talk at CXC, not the one that she did with Art, where
Mm-hmm.
she went through her career and spent spent some serious time on how they put together Raw and whatnot, and I was
Mhm.
just in awe.
Yeah, it's incredible. She's an
You
incredible
know,
person. She's very, I mean, she's, um,
so creative in her own right, and like with this vision and drive to make cool things out of other people's talent as well, if that makes
mhm,
sense.
mhm. No,
You
she's,
know,
there's a great, you know, I always remember because it was a cool experience. Was Alex Spiro, who's the Nobrow founder and like the original editor of Hilda, he was showing me one time this book that and this may be apocryphal. You know, I never confirmed this story with Luke Pearson, but I heard from Alex's side. But like basically, he was looking at a sketchbook that Luke Pearson had, and the sketchbook did not have Hilda comics in it. It just had drawings. It just had things. It had comics. It had little things. And
right,
Alex saw Hilda. He saw these images, and he was like, "That what's that?" In the sea of like, Will Elder calls it chicken fat, but in the sea of all
right,
that chicken fat, what is that thing?
right.
What is the story that behind her face? Why does she look like that? What's she doing? What are those emotions? And that, he didn't make that comic, but he helped Luke Pearson go. Luke Pearson was like, oh, I'm going to winnow through all these different stories and all these different ideas I have to kind of really hone this one. And watching Francoise do that, I always remember with Ivan Bernetti doing that, but also she did it with Noah too. But it was just this thing where she was like, she's able to like look through. And one of the things that I think she does really well, that is really, I think that's really hard because comics are so hard, is that she's, as an editor, able to see past. Um, you don't have to give her as finished a product for her to understand what you're trying to do. And I
Right.
think that one of the challenges that people who are new to editing comics face is that they kind of, and it happened to me the first time that there was a guy that I was really good friends with. He's a cartoonist, and we got to know each other. And he liked my writing, and I was selling his comics at the store, and he asked me to edit his comic. And that was my first time having that experience. And it was so hard because I wasn't at a place where I could look at like chicken scratch and tell you what to do with it. So
Right.
by the time I could become like cognizant and understand and read into the pacing and read into the story, he'd
He,
already answered a lot of questions. He'd already finished a lot of pages, right?
well, and he'd also put his blood and sweat onto the page. So if you wanted a change, it was, I mean,
Yeah, I don't.
I've talked to,
I will push back on that because that's one of the things that's an excuse that cartoonists use all the time. The Everybody puts their blood and sweat to everything.
no, no,
Everybody puts their blood and sweat. So it's always going to be hard. But it was like I don't
uh,
mind like interrupting. Go ahead.
I guess I'm talking more the time,
Right. Yeah,
like
no, that's what I mean.
to change a word or two
Right. No, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah.
is
Getting
nothing.
it
To
earlier.
redraw a page is like a day of work.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say is that like if you get that and Francoise can get there faster than anybody
Yeah,
I've ever seen. Like
right.
she's able to look at that and be like, no, this doesn't work. And she's also
I
able
mean,
to pull it and move it
yeah,
around and read and be like, no, this is what the spread looks like. This is what
right,
the page turn. This is because that's a big part of
right.
like children's books,
Oh
especially.
yeah.
The
No,
pacing is a
I've
big
had
part of
Shelley Bond on a lot of times, and that's what she'll talk about
it.
is like managing to see it early,
It's very early. But yeah, so
to find
Francoise
yeah.
was I was it
I
was
totally believe.
amazing to watch her like pull and change because she would often
Right.
work in InDesign. She would take a little pencil scratch thing and she would drop it into InDesign and then edit within InDesign with a facility that I think escapes most people, not
Oh yeah.
designers, but just most
No,
people.
I
So
understand.
it was
That
amazing to
sounds
watch. And then her having to like kind of rewind and show me how to do it. I remember it was like you could tell you're watching somebody like they're trying to run, but they keep having to stop to be like, all right, come on, this part,
come on.
this part.
I mean, this is the teacher in me. Like one of the things that there's actually data on is that arguably the best teachers are C students because the better you are at something,
Mhm.
sometimes the more work it is to break it down to the person who doesn't know how to do it yet.
Mhm.
To like slow down enough to go, oh yeah, yeah, this thing that I don't even think about anymore, you don't know about.
Right. Yeah. So
Um,
yeah. Um,
you know, and this is not to say that I don't think Francois is a good teacher because the way you described it sounds like the person who's aware of the teaching part of it because
mhm.
it's like, oh, wait a minute, I need to go teach this before I can teach that because he doesn't know this.
No, I would say I think she's a phenomenal teacher.
Yeah,
She's a phenomenal editor. She's a great writer, and it's very it's a fascinating experience to watch. It is at times it's absolutely like sticking your face into like a washing machine. Like it's a lot. It's gonna
yeah.
it asks a lot of you, and and it's yeah it
But
asks.
that's, I mean, that's what any good teacher or boss does.
Well, it's also, it's the question of like, is this what you want to do? Like,
Right,
do you want to get better at something? Do you want to learn how to do
right,
something? It's not going to be easy. I mean, if that's what you're chasing, then you don't have to do this. There's a lot of things that aren't like this, that aren't hard like
right,
this.
right.
She's a fascinating person. Was really, there's still moments where I think about like those
I mean,
conversations we would have.
I'm
Yeah.
listening to this and just completely jealous of the experience.
One of the neatest, because
Second
I
time,
was,
because Bob Sikoriak's a friend too. So
Mhm.
he was like one of the first editors they brought on, outside editors they brought on Raw. So I've
Mhm.
heard some of this story before, and it's like, oh, that sounds so awesome.
No, I'll tell you, I did most of this remotely because I live in Minnesota. She's obviously in New York, but there was a
Right,
time during I can't remember what point it was, but I went out there for some weekly meetings and stuff, and I would meet her at the studio, which is the same, it's the office studio house, where they put Raw together and where
right,
she raised her children,
right,
and she had printed out one of the books we were working on, and like a copy for me and a copy for her, and we went through the book together. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, this is so hard and fascinating, and I'm learning, I'm forgetting more than I'm learning, but I'm still learning a ton. But I was like,
right.
I realized I was like, doing this on Zoom is like having somebody hold you down. Like there's
Yeah,
doing it in person. I was like, if I was doing this every day, which we wouldn't because she didn't have that kind of time. She had carved out this day for me, like because she knew I
right,
was going to be there for that time. And
right.
even then, there was actually that same week, I had an experience of what it's like for her. There was a horrific mass shooting that week, not in New York,
No, 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 I
but
know.
but it immediately, yeah.
I've survived. I've been on the periphery of three, so I know too
Well, so
much.
when that happens, there is at the New Yorker, there's
Yep,
all of a sudden a question of like, well, what is this going to do to the cover? What is this going to do to the what are we doing
yep,
this week? And so she
yep.
just like we had more meetings planned, we had more time carved out, and she was like, no, I'm not doing any of that now. I have to go. You should just
Yeah,
go. So I went to the Astra shared office and I worked there. I did
right.
other things while she went off, and I was like, and it was a window into like, oh yeah, you can have this like her life can have this schedule, but she's also if the world that's
Now,
her job.
one of the teachers at the high school I work at um teaches her essay on an 11 cover for the New
Mm-hmm.
Yorker because essentially, I mean, what you're describing is what they wound up or what she did, only she also like she and Art were running to get her kids while she was going through all of this in her head,
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
to figure out, okay, what is the cover going to be?
yeah. It's
You
not. I
know,
mean, it was a wild experience.
right.
But yes,
Um,
I got a chance. It was so cool, and just, it's neat. Like books we worked on. Uh, one of them's up for Frank Camusa's book. Fire breathing duckling is up for an Eisner right now. Like it's still doing it. It's still doing the deal.
right,
Um, she and I both pulled back from Astra. It went through the changes that happen when, a company gets bought
right,
and when things get bought, things get absorbed.
right,
Her daughter also worked at Astra for a time before I started, and she left pretty early in my time there, and that kind of like was a challenge. I think that was a real challenge. But it was a challenge. I mean, it was a challenging company to work for. I love those guys. I mean, they were very supportive to me. But there
Right.
was like it was like a lot of startup kind of stuff where, they
Right.
closed some imprints. Maria Russo, she'd been the New York Times editor for a long time, book reviews editor, and they had brought her on, started an imprint, and then she left. Um, they bought a sci-fi publisher, incorporated them in. It was just a weird time. And then eventually I was just like, I just don't know that. I mean, it was like really hard to work for a corporate New York publishing startup that had seven imprints. It became just really challenging. And
Right.
one day, it was like, I think I just I'm not really having fun anymore.
Right.
Um, I'm not getting to work with Francoise. Like I'm not, and it's not her fault. Like she just is
Right.
not she's got a life and she's got her job,
Right.
and this is not what she had signed up for, as far as I can
Right.
understand. And so it just kind of became a thing where I was like, I think it's time for me to move on. um Around that same time, Jack had gotten, the golden ticket job. She got this really amazing offer. I worked Fantagraphics for years because I was an editor for TCJ for 6 years.
Okay.
The comics journal. I edited it
Right. Right. Right.
I'd written for them. I'd written a column for them, and then I was their editor all through COVID. And so and we'd redesigned the site. We'd done all this stuff. So I knew Jack. I knew her really well. She'd known me. We'd done parties at the store. I'd known all those people. You don't go after your friend's job. Like you
Right.
just don't. But when your friend is like, I'm going, and I was like, really? And she was like, do you want it? And I was like, I mean, I have a job, but maybe I do. But so I moved on. And,
Right.
to work with, guys who I've known. Eric, I mean, Gary has been an influence on me intellectually, for years. Eric has always been lovely to me. He's always been a
Eric's
supporter of me
amazing.
through all my various jobs in comics. We'd obviously see a lot of each other when I got into doing business to business type shows. Eric was the guy who would go to those shows at the beginning. When I started doing ALA, there was a group of us that started because, like we talked about, the comics change with ALA is the big library show that happens
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
year.
I was about to say, are you going to be at ALA this year?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, then we
Um,
should see about doing lunch while you're in town.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're having a party with Joe Sacco and Brianna and stuff like that. It's gonna be,
Oh, well, I mean, if
interesting.
you want to invite me to the party, I'd love to meet Joe Sacco, but
I'll put you
but
on.
I don't know if I'm cool enough.
No, you'll be cool enough. I just didn't realize you're that locate. That's your location.
I am almost exactly halfway between um Chicago and Milwaukee.
Okay,
And also I will toss out like the shop that I book stuff for is in Algonquin, which is about an hour west of Chicago. But we
okay,
also have the most square footage of really any comic shop probably in Illinois, certainly in Chicagoland.
okay.
I mean, I would put us close to Third Eye in terms of square footage.
That's big.
Um, so like if you got people in town and you want to set up an event, let me know
Okay,
because we have the space.
okay. Um, but yeah. Anyway, so that's how I ended up where I'm at. That's not a long. And then you wanted a 5-minute example of what my job is. My job is exactly what this is. Although we're talking about me, my job is just to um, connect people who like Gilbert Hernandez with the information that a new Gilbert Hernandez book is coming out. That's it. That's it. That is the job of what I do. Communications is that job. Marketing, in the sense that, like, you need to connect people with the information. um, that's not to say that most people who want that information are probably going to find it on their own, because that's how comics people function. I get,
Right.
I mean, there's people out there who, the second a new Dan Clowes thing on Amazon leaks
Though
out,
I
they
will say that you make my life way easier just
Mhm.
because I mean I told this to David Hyde when I was on earlier too. It's not that I don't find this information on my own. It's not that I'm not pretty good at finding a lot of email addresses and sending out. But if I can send one email to inquire about four people
Mhm.
rather than having to spend time tracking down the
Of
email
course.
address or the Instagram or whatever and sending four different emails, like it means I can spend more time doing the part that I love the most, which is having the conversations rather than going nuts to set them up.
Hmm.
So I love that publicists exist, and I know that creators love that publicists exist because like one of the hardest things about comics is the number of different hats you're supposed to wear
Hmm.
when lots of the time all you want to do is make a comic. But you got to do your own PR and you got to and like some PR they're good at it. I mean, a lot of them enjoy going on a podcast and talking about comics, but like having to do the legwork of finding the podcast or having to do the legwork of posting on Instagram and Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever on a regular basis so that people pay attention.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, that's kind of like me and why I don't have video yet. Like I would do video podcasts because people are interested in them if I felt like I had the time and energy to make them something more than just this.
Hmm.
Just this, you might as well just listen. Like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
But like if I was doing just a little bit of editing where I was putting in graphics of stuff that we talked about, then it would be worth it. But that's not what I'm good at. It's not what I'm interested in being good at. And yeah. So this is my way of saying thank you for being you.
Yeah.
My long-winded way of saying thank you for being you because there aren't enough of yous in the comic industry. Um, Particularly because some of the bigger publishers have people that are supposed to be you but don't get comics, if that makes
Oh, that's
sense.
don't get them, like, don't understand them, don't care for them.
A little bit of each.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I've always thought that both, uh, certainly at the big two, their publicity people don't understand how to sell comics.
Okay.
They're all selling movies.
Hmm.
They don't appreciate the medium.
Okay.
They don't they don't champion the medium. I mean, one of the things that I know that I try to do, and I know David tries to do, and I would be willing to bet that you try to do, is not just, oh, how do I let comics fans know about this, but oh, this book would appeal to anybody who likes crime fiction. How do I let
Hmm.
people who don't know they like comics but like crime fiction know about this book?
Hmm.
Yeah. And I don't even think that goes through the radar of some of the bigger companies. I think they think of comics as their bastard stepchild.
Hmm.
Just from my interactions with everybody above the comic level,
Uh-huh.
if that makes sense. Like
Hmm.
the editors, the writers, the artists, they all love and get comics, but then when you're yeah, I don't want to get like mean. That's not what I do on this podcast. But I've had some interesting experiences with the people selling comics
Hmm.
who are clearly not just selling comics. Like they've got you can just I guess the best analogy I can put is I grew up watching Cubs games on WGN, and the WGN baseball crew, like Joe Carneo and Arnie Harris, were the producer and director of Cubs baseball from the first Cubs baseball broadcast in like 1950 until like their deaths in the 2000s.
Hmm.
So for 50 years they had the same brain trust. And 90% of what they did was baseball. I don't know that they like did producing and directing of other sports stuff. So they were constantly figuring out what's the best way to present a baseball game.
Hmm.
Whereas half the time when I watch a baseball game on ESPN or like the game of the week on one of the networks, it's like this feels like a football game.
Hmm.
They don't know how to look for the action. They don't have the angles and the insight of a baseball crew,
Hmm.
and it'll bother me. I sometimes feel like, particularly for some of the more corporate owned comics companies, they try to sell it without understanding what it is they're selling.
Hmm.
That makes sense. Which is why I love the people who know what it is they're selling and do it
Hmm.
well. And I'm monologuing, and I shouldn't do that. I should come up with more questions because you're doing much better at talking today than I am. But when I start talking, you're also a very good listener. And then we just,
No, I think, I mean, if I could respond to that, like I
yeah,
understand, um, what you're saying. I also do sometimes wonder if like the, to like speak to your like baseball analogy, because I was thinking about this a lot recently. It's if I pull back from the actual thing that we're talking about, whether it's comics or baseball or television production or selling or whatever, like I get down to it, it's like, well, you gotta, generally speaking, a person has to want to do things better.
yeah,
They have to like be a little bit unsatisfied with the end result of whatever it is that they were doing. And to speak to your baseball thing, like it sounds like what you're describing is somebody who like they looked at it and like they first off they understood what their job was. Their job was to make a compelling baseball narrative product that was
right,
then so you got to you limited the constraints are you have to deliver the information, you have to show people the game of baseball, but then you
right.
also have to like edit it and tell it in such a way so that it's compelling and exciting and it features some of the things that like because you watch a baseball game live, you decide what you're going to pay attention to, you
Hmm.
decide when the moments you're going to step away,
Right,
and a guy who handles the television production has to make those decisions on like a broader level. But you also have to be somebody who, when you get done, you're not satisfied. And I don't mean you're critical. You have to be somewhat critical, but you have to get done and look at it and go like, well, how am I going to do this better? How am I going
right.
to do this better? Um, and so much of what we do, I when I think we feel that flavor of like not caring for how things, we feel like we're presented with a person who doesn't give a shit. Um, I do think that some of that is like, I mean, it's not that I'm a pro. It's not. I'm not going to make a defense of like capitalism or something like that. But it's like you become locked in. You're safe. You get
Right.
away with it. That first time
Right.
you have that experience of getting away with it is for some people, I think that can really mess them up. I know it can mess me up. That moment when you didn't have to study and they still thought you were great.
Right.
When all of a sudden you realize, like, oh, like I could have done a shitty baseball broadcast. It didn't matter. And I've had that
Right.
moment. I've had that because,
Right.
my experience was like on a very boring level was doing like a sales presentation to sales reps.
Right.
And like all of a sudden realizing right before I was like, I'm not as nervous about this one. I kind
Right.
of don't give a shit. And then after it gets
Right.
done, people go like, oh, you did such a good job. And I'm like, you thought that was a good job?
Right.
And I don't mean that self-deprecating thing. I don't
No,
mean
no, no.
any of that.
Like,
I mean like legitimately, like you know
right.
that you
Oh, yeah.
you slacked off,
I
you didn't
totally
give a
know what you're
shit,
talking about.
and nobody picks up on it. That moment can really break your future because you can become somebody who just doesn't give a shit, and you got a
Right.
million excuses why it doesn't matter because you're the smartest guy in the room. And there are a lot of
Right.
people, especially in publishing, especially there are a lot of people in every business. I can only speak to the one I work in. I don't think it's worse or better than all the other ones, but that is a situation that like you can tell when somebody's like, oh, I haven't had anybody kind of pushing me or competition. I'm going to get paid either way. It's
Right.
easier at bigger companies. It is.
Right.
You're a
Oh,
bigger
well,
company.
and I was literally gonna bring that up is like across the board. As soon as companies are big enough, and in the United States, that's like almost all of them because we've become
Yeah, we have a lot of giant corporations.
conglomerified, that the people who are writing the checks don't understand most of the aspects of their business, and therefore don't know how to judge most of the aspects of their business, then you have a lot of the middle management that it's, my dad used to say it, they smell right.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, he
I mean,
must be good because nothing catastrophic has happened and I like golfing with him.
yeah,
So he must be doing his job.
yeah. And I would say, and there's a part of me too, like all of these things kind of work in this big, messy sea. There was a comic that was, it might have been in the New Yorker. I can't remember. It feels to me like a New Yorker cartoon, but I always remember it was if you work really hard, you can get one of these, and it's a drawing of a headstone that says "worked really hard."
Right.
And there is like there's seasons in life where I am like, yeah, no, this is a time when I want to
Well,
like
and
really,
there are balances because like if it's not something you care about, but you need the money and you have the job, then like breaking yourself rather than doing what you need to do and then spending time with your family or going to a baseball game or whatever. I don't actually really begrudge them
no,
for
I don't
you know
either.
what I mean?
And I think it's an interesting metric because it's like that language because we were just talking to my daughter is was we were having a conversation about this just recently, but we often have that language like the what you just described.
Right.
That's the kind of metric that we say like you shouldn't blah 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 because you got this blah blah blah, right? You should not. What is how do we define what that breaking yourself is? How do we define what too much is? Because I think
At,
we're very good at defining what, like,
at,
oh my God, I gotta take a break.
and the answer is it's an individual
Right. It
decision.
is. It is.
I don't get to
Until
decide when you've reached too much unless I'm your boss.
right. Well, I also it's also I always think about this thing in comics too. It's like
I can be
how do you want to
annoyed
be
as the
a
consumer that wants more people to know this. And I know that there's somebody whose job is to make more people know this. And they're probably even getting paid way better than somebody who might do it better.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, like the purpose of capitalism is the only person who it matters whether or not they think you're working hard enough is your boss. Now I can be annoyed as fuck that the
Mhm.
only people who seem to have to work really, really hard for their money are the people who make the least money. And I am. We
Mhm.
need to fix that system. But like
Well, I
that's
always think about that thing you said about that your thing about middle management and smelling right. I always remember
yeah.
I think it was Oliver Bateman I first read this idea from, but it was just you don't promote the guys who do the job.
No.
No, you promote the guys who like kind of just are good talkers and like but they don't really do anything. Those are the guys who become managers. Because if you
Right.
promote the guy who like comes in every day and busts his ass and does the job, then like then you got to go find somebody else to do that. And that
I
guy's
mean,
hard to
theoretically,
find.
he has to go find the person that will do that. And
Yeah, but you're never
theoretically, he knows how to find the person who will do that. I mean, like, particularly like the thing that scares me the most about AI is the thing that's not being talked about very much at all, which is the people that are pitching the hell out of it, the people who are telling you to use it, the people who are selling it the most, etc., don't actually understand it. They're not the people who programmed it. They're not the people who make it work. They don't actually know what it can and can't do. Sometimes they're even candid enough to acknowledge that they're
mm-hmm,
selling an idea more than a product.
mm-hmm,
But that's where the real danger comes. Like when you're overselling something, or like to flip it the other way. My brother's a data scientist, right?
mm-hmm,
He got hired by a company, because we're going to hire data scientists because it's the age of big information, blah blah blah, and then laid off because he did his job too well. And they
mm-hmm,
realized that they didn't need a data scientist yet because they didn't understand what it was that he'd done, and that what they wanted from him is what he'd done in like the first 5 minutes of work, but they'd given him like 6 weeks to do the project, and they'd gotten upset with him anytime he helped out any other team that like would put something in the Slack that he could help out with.
mm-hmm.
But then when he did his presentation, it like went, Woo! Because they wanted the like the basic statistical analysis that again he like they wanted what's the population growth in this area and therefore oh we can scale up according to population growth and he'd broken down the demographics, he'd broken down the trends and this and that and which populations bought their product and which
Hmm.
and they were like we don't understand that.
Hmm.
And then he I mean so I mean when you have people I mean, this is going off the comics topic, but like when you have people hiring that don't really, I mean, this is why uh, I worked healthcare for a decade, and it seemed like every two or
Okay.
three years we'd have a new, really bad, um, like data software that we had to enter everything with, and it's like you know that how this is happening is maybe the people at the top actually understand healthcare, but what they don't understand is software. So they're getting sold a bill of goods and they're going, oh, well, everybody complains about the software we have. This one sounds good without actually having any good way to go, well, does it actually do what we want to do in a efficient manner?
Hmm.
Because they don't understand the software well enough to actually ask the right questions.
Hmm.
I mean, I know IT guys that have made careers out of nobody actually understands my system, so they can't fire me.
Yeah.
And I don't actually blame them
Yeah.
because hey, that's pretty good job security.
It's like a flip. It's like the other another version of what's so good they can't ignore you.
Right.
Yeah. So
Uh,
confusing that they can't fire you.
I mean, generally you have to be pretty good too,
Hmm.
because it has to work well enough that they care that you can keep it going.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, I mean, this is among the reasons that I know that whatever it is that we have right now isn't capitalism, because capitalism actually has competition, and capitalism
Oh,
actually
I see what you mean.
has
Yeah.
has some reason to innovate and try to do better rather than just make more money. Making making more money isn't actually really the only score system in capitalism the way Adam Smith wrote about it.
Hmm.
It's about everybody doing better because there's this competition and like, oh, this doesn't work well. There's incentive for somebody to do it better.
Hmm.
There's not incentive for somebody to do it better if you're never going to be able to like if all the money's controlled by the one person that will just squash you, even if you do it better. I mean,
Hmm.
in comics, perfect example. Now that it's finally as dead as a doornail, other than the originals, and the originals are still great. So, like, I almost hate bringing it up because they're making good comics. But Comixology was this one. I mean, you were there. Comixology was this wonderful thing that became a wonderful app that was an even more wonderful app when you could buy comics and read them digitally and for the first decade or so that Amazon owned it, they didn't mess with it and it continued being this amazing thing. And then they decided they could save money if they didn't have to have a separate set of programmers for Kindle and Comixology.
Hmm.
And it died
Hmm.
because what made Comixology special wasn't just that you could read digital comics, it was the way you could go, oh, let me click on this inker
Hmm.
and find all the digital comics available from this inker. Let me click on this letterer, this writer, this like. So the first part that got killed when they rolled it into Kindle was all the things that made it something, essentially all the ways that people would buy things that they hadn't heard of before. All the ways
Oh, I didn't
people would
realize they did
explore
that.
comics
Yeah. I didn't realize they
went
did that.
away
Yeah.
immediately.
Okay.
because Kindle isn't set up to it's set up for like a maximum of I think four authors that you can
Uh-huh.
click on, and it's certainly not set up in a way where you know what their jobs are that well,
Hmm.
and the Amazon page isn't set up in a way that's as easy to click, and so I mean, like literally the money I spent on digital comics crashed overnight
Hmm.
because I was no longer discovering anything. I was only buying the stuff that I knew I liked,
Hmm.
you know, and then slowly it got rolled in more and more, and you can tell that their panel by panel isn't quite as good as it used to be, and that opened up the market. And now you've got Neon Ichiban, you've got Sweet, you've got Global Comics all in that field again,
Hmm.
which overall is a good thing because again, competition, etc. But like it's just amazing how those good things, when you put them in a big corporation, maintaining them isn't necessarily as easy of a profit as just having them and letting them become average.
I went through the same thing with my Uller from Chili Pad. Do you know what that is?
I don't.
It's a thing you put on your mattress that has a little temperature thing, so you can set the temperature. Because I run hot, my
Okay.
wife runs cold,
Gotcha.
and I really don't like getting all sweaty. So I bought this thing that was, I'm sure it was advertised on Instagram or something like that.
Right.
And it was this thing that goes on my side of the bed, and it has like a little water coolant system to keep
Right.
so I can have a nice cold mattress that's nice and cold throughout the night.
Right.
And but there's no, it's a really well made product, and so you don't need to buy extra things. You don't need to like, and that's not how you function as a company. You can't make, you have to make things that break down. You have to make things that have software updates. You have to make things that have a subscription model. And so these guys did pretty well. And then they
Because somewhere along the line we started believing in infinite growth.
yeah. And so the guys who make, so the only way they could make money is to get, and it, but I mean, they're, I assume they're victims of their own success. You hit a point where it's like, there is a certain percentage of people who want to buy this thing.
Right.
And after you've kind of hit that number, they're not coming back. Like I never bought another one again. And so over
Right.
the 7 or 8 years that I had that thing, the company got bought by, it went bankrupt, and somebody bought it. And then I started getting emails that told me, they were like, we've got this special powder to put in the water that you should buy every 30 days. And I was like, that thing has lasted 7 years without me doing anything. Like
Right.
sometimes I even forget to put a distilled water in there, and I just use tap water and it works just
Right.
fine. So,
Right.
but it eventually broke. It eventually sprung a leak, like as things that are made out of rubber and water and silicon and whatever eventually are going to. And I threw it away, and I went and looked, and they don't make them anymore because that company doesn't
Right.
exist. And now I just have to deal with it, and it's kind of like, this is the first summer without it, and it's gonna suck.
Now, hopefully you can find some
And
other option.
there's another company that makes those kind of
Right.
things, but I'm like, I think I passed the point where I'm like, I think I passed the point of caring. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, but yeah, you're exactly right. Because, and like,
I mean, I doubt,
it
I would
doesn't
say
have to be that way. I'm pretty certain Fantagraphics doesn't run that way because
no,
they've
because
been
it's not,
around forever. They decided that what we care about is sustainability, not maximum
yeah, it's not,
return short term.
there isn't a, there's not an investor around. There's not a,
Right.
you need to do all this stuff. I mean, it is challenging. I mean, Norton, our distributor, is, we're very lucky not to have a distributor that's like demanding that kind of growth and constantly raising their fees and that sort of thing. I mean, that's the challenge that a lot of publishers
Right.
face. Um, I mean, I often think of, uh, Dan Nadell is somebody who I have a lot of respect for, who ran Picture Box and wrote the Robert Crumb biography last year, and he's really fascinating career. And I remember when he was like kind of shutting down, kind of his son was born not too long before my daughter was born, and so we would kind of, you always kind of get close to these people who are in the journey of uh, parenting on the same kind of schedule you're on. And I remember talking to him and him telling me at one point, he was like, "You're going to stop giving a shit." Because I was going so hard all the time. And he was like, "You're going to stop giving a shit about this pretty soon. Like, you're just going to want to stay home." And he was right. Not too long after that, few years, all of a sudden I was like, I don't want to go to 20 shows a year. I don't want to. Like, it sucks.
Right.
When you have a kid who's like 2 and 3, like they change overnight. But there's this thing with Dan, when Picture
I
Box,
know. I got grandkids now.
yeah, when Picture Box was shutting down, there was definitely a certain kind of language online as if this is a failure. Like, because this cool comics publisher is not continuing, And it was one of those things where it's like he didn't bring up Fantagraphics, but Fantagraphics is an exception to that. Jordan Quarterly are exceptions to that. Jordan Quarterly is a company that changed ownership, from
Right.
to Peggy and Tom, and has continued on. They're now a unionized thing. Like, this is the exception. What normally happens is that when you like something and it's cool, the band breaks up and the store closes down. And not just because that's the way life is. People move on and things change. And I that doesn't mean that the thing was a failure because it stopped. It means that you're
Right.
supposed to this is life and you're supposed to
I mean,
enjoy the things that are
the
there.
ideal way for it to stop is for it to stop because they decide to retire, not because they have to quit.
Mhm. Or
Um,
no, it should also be because they want to.
well,
They
that's what I meant.
just want to. Like, you don't like
But
yeah, yeah,
it didn't mean
yeah,
retire
yeah, yeah.
automatically. I meant
Like, take it all the way in.
they get to go out on their own terms rather
Mhm.
than I have to leave because I can't live off of, this is no longer sustainable.
Right,
That's what I
right.
meant.
I think of it. Part of it, I think, comes from the way I responded the way I did is because I think part of it comes from comics in publishing too, is this endless chasing of potential and a front list. It's always forever. There's no end in sight. It's always about the next thing. And when things end, it's always about how they shouldn't have ended or they should have been done differently. And it is
Right.
one of those things where I'm like, I just don't. And this is a. I know you said we don't want to get into the shit talking and negative thing, but I will say that
I don't mind some shit talking. It's just not my, I prefer to talk about the things that I love rather than particularly when I don't know.
see, I love shit talking. So
Yeah,
the
you're allowed to shit talk.
so
I'm talking about me.
like when you talk about that, I think about this sometimes. I don't always feel this way, but you brought up much earlier, you brought up that idea of like people who are in these jobs, these comics jobs, and they don't give a shit or they don't do it well enough or whatever. And I share those same feelings. I worked in a store for a long time. I worked in distribute. I know exactly who you're talking about, not by name, but I know what type of personality. But
Well,
there's
and
a
I don't know
part of
most
me,
of them by name either
but there's a
because
part
I
of
don't
me
bother to remember.
um, there's a part of me that over the years has is it, and I love comics, but I'm willing to turn it back on comics sometimes and say, do comics deserve better treatment? Have they given? Have they? Because the
Yes.
people that don't make these things, the people that don't work in the creative thing, so many of them, because those are my people. My loyalty is with critics. My loyalty is with the people who aren't creative. That doesn't mean I hate them or I'm against them, but there is a part where, like, creatives and editorial too will chew up the people around and they will leave them behind. And they're not there for them. And that's fine. I understand that. That's the infrastructure. The guy who gets paid the best and most reliably in comics will always be the UPS guy. It'll always be the guy who delivers that stuff. That's the guy who has to get paid. The guy who makes the cardboard boxes these things come in will always get paid. The printer will always get paid. Uh, but there is a point where it's like, if you're really great at selling something, just anything, if you're really, really great at selling something, should you be doing that for the umpteenth version of when the Marvel characters met a bunch of vampires, and this time around we're going to put it in a plastic bag because it's got a lot of blood in it? Like, if you're
No.
really great, if you're a craft level, give a shit, start the day at 5 a.m. fucking knows how to do this deal.
No, I
Why should
honestly,
that
when we
be?
talk the Marvel DC guy, I feel like that should be the proving ground to get your job. I think they should be spending less money on it,
No, I see. I see.
but
Um,
getting the people who care,
mhm. I just
and
think
then
that.
knowing that they're going to move on because if you're good at it, that's not what you're selling.
Mhm. I think about that particular thing when I see.
I mean, I think my frustration is I'm pretty aware that the people who are in those jobs are probably paid as well or better than you are for less
I'm
work.
sure. Well, I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. But
And that just seems wrong to me on so many levels.
I'm sure they are. But I also think about like there's a level of. I remember when I first started talking to this one guy who was a very successful superhero cartoonist who's still around and he still does great work um, on his own terms and everything like that. And I remember hanging out with him early on in my kind of professional career and the level of contempt. He wasn't a mean guy, but the level of contempt he had for the people who like bought his comics and read these comics, just the disgust he had for them was something that I found so fascinating. And even somebody like me who like ultimately
I've
I'm
met a
not
couple of those.
I'm
It's
it's
always
not
interesting to me.
yeah, it's not I'm not really cynical, but I can be mean. But I was like even me, I was like I was kind of taken aback by the level of contempt and disgust he had for his own fan base. But then over time, and he told me he was like, "You'll get there." Like that's what he said. Like you'll get there to me.
Right.
And it was one of those things where like it didn't ever happen when I worked at the store. I loved the people who shopped at the store. I delighted in them. They were my favorite people in the world. Not because they read the things that I thought they should read, because I didn't care what they read. I just wanted them to be happy. I just wanted to have a cool job, and they gave me that, and it was great to watch. Um, but it was over time I understood it was like, oh, when you're treated like the second coming of Jesus Christ, no matter what shit you make by some of the dumbest motherfuckers you've ever met. That is, to go back to that baseball thing I was talking about,
Right.
that is asking you to harbor a level of optimism and respect for humanity that humanity is not giving you evidence for why you should.
Well, see I mean, and we got to get to closing questions in a second because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I will say, I've met a couple of those, and what I always think is interesting because that falls into about the same category, and sometimes it's even the same people that'll be like, nobody's made good comics in 30 years, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like the more you talk to them, the more you realize that like their personality responds to the lowest common denominator.
Mm-hmm.
But as you talk to them, it's like, oh, but they're also aware of all of their great fans. And oh, they went from telling you that no good comic has been made in 30 years to recommending an amazing comic made last week.
Mm-hmm.
Like without even noticing. So, like, I think a lot of it has, yes, some of the million fans they have are dumb as shit and will be uncritical of any of their work. And some of their million fans are not. And
Mm-hmm.
most are somewhere in between. So sometimes it's who have they had to deal with the most this week?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's their own personality. Are they more of a cynic? Do they obsess more over the lowest common denominator? Or did they used to take it so seriously that they had to create this bubble around themselves that because like, oh, I'm unhealthy when I start taking the way my fans treat me as who I am. I don't want to be that guy. Going back to your discussion, I don't want to be that guy that treats the woman who doesn't officially own this shop, but it's her success that makes this shop. I don't want to treat her like she's dumb,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm so used to people treating me like gods that when she doesn't treat me like a god, I mean, human psychology is fascinating and a whole other discussion that
Mm.
that I like having on a regular basis. But that's also my autism brain I look at everything from every different angle. And like every time I think I've seen all the angles, I'll hear another one and then find five more.
Hmm.
Um, that's the biggest reason that I'm careful about the way that I shit talk because
Hmm.
I mean the most simplified version I've ever heard is Brian Bendis will talk about he won't tell anybody what his least favorite comic of his is because he's like the second I say I don't like this thing that I did, I will find out that it was the favorite comic and incredibly meaningful to the fan in front of me.
Hmm.
Because my taste and their taste might be different,
Hmm.
and who am I to say that they're wrong? Um, but yeah, let's get to closing questions. Then we'll
Okay.
chat for a couple minutes before I let you go, but I'll try to get
Okay.
you
Go
out of
ahead.
here in a timely manner so you can go work.
All right. Give me
Uh,
your closing questions.
all right. Eric actually gave me one of the best answers to this first one I've ever heard. So in terms of Fantagraphics people, you've got a high standard to live up to.
Okay.
Um, I've been in this podcasting thing that somehow makes me part of this industry for like less than 5 years now, and I feel like I've entered the twilight zone. My life has become so wonderful and surreal in so many ways that I never ever would have imagined the first time I talked about comic books and put it up on the internet.
Okay.
Um, Friendships I've made, conversations I've gotten to have, things that I've gotten to witness, like that if you told 10-year-old me, you're going to get to do blank, I would go, yeah, fuck you. There's no way that's going to happen in my life.
Hmm.
But I find that like everybody in comics has those stories. Everybody has those moments, those experiences that like when they stop and sit and think about it, they almost have to pinch themselves because they're like, was that really something that I got to do or I got to see or somebody that I got to meet or hang out with or become friends with or whatever. So I've started collecting the stories. Tell me one of your surreal experiences that wouldn't have happened if you didn't have a life in comics.
Surreal experiences. Uh,
Or like if surreal's too out there, just like one of those special moments, one of those things that you still kind of pinch yourself and go, "Wow, I did
I mean,
that."
I would say, watching, wasn't one an individual day, um, but I spent a good bit of time doing the Tuesday unpack of the new release titles um, at at a comic book store with Michel Fife in the months uh, leading up to him making Death Zone, which led into Cobra. And so he and I would spend all day together going through checking in like here's your boxes of diamond shit, like did you get all your copies of this thing, and so go that experience of going through the new 52 with him and just like going through like whatever, the beginning of Saga with him,
Right,
just like these big high watermarks in terms of sales and in terms of cultural interest for single issue comics while he was literally giving birth to Copra and then building this level, this insane structure to his life so that he could deliver Copra on a consistent basis. Because that was also the unique thing. So I've seen people make cool shit. I've been there when I remember when we first got Michael DeForge's Lose #1, like when it was like when he was just a guy who made things. Like I remember
right,
those moments. But the difference with Fife was I got to see how he structured his life to make a thing, how he built a system and then lived by that system.
right,
And it was so inspiring on just a human level. So much more. It was so much more. I really, not again, not to be. nasty about it. It was so much more interesting than every other comics thing I ever saw because
I believe it.
it was somebody who was like they caught their own personal lightning in a bottle,
Yeah,
and they became their best self in front of me.
that sounds
And
amazing.
it was one of those things where it was like you get a chance to see somebody do that. You can see it in sports, you can see it in all avenues of life. But I got a chance. That was my version of that.
Right,
I've never coached a high school team that made it to the playoffs. I've never done
right,
that. I've never gone to school with LeBron James when he was 14. But
right.
but I did
Yeah,
get
I
to
mean that
see.
sounds like going to high school with Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I got to see FIFA do the thing
Become
for
FIFA.
real, and I got to watch it happen. In the same way that I get to watch I mean, everything around it happened. People
Right.
embrace it. It was great. So yeah, that was
Yeah.
my best. That's my best. That's the experience I'll take with me.
Yeah,
Um,
no, you, you
yeah.
you you gave Eric Reynolds an absolute run for his money, and he told me about a fake terrorist experience at a con in Spain.
hmm Yeah, I would say for me that's the one. That's the one. Yeah.
No, that's great. All right. Tell me something you love, preferably a comic, but we don't really have rules. Preferably storytelling, but again with the rules. But something that you love that not enough people around you have experienced, and you'd really, really like them to, so that you can have more people to talk about it with.
So I recently I have an answer for you that's pretty relevant to me. But so I got a chance this past week to be on a panel set up by Sally Madden at this show called Flop, and it was called The Saddest Comic in the World. And so you were supposed to like how it, she was like she specifically did not give a lot of guidance, so you could interpret that as like you could be arch, you could show up
Right.
for this thing with like a joke answer, because I immediately thought of joke answers, right? You could have like a meta answer. This is sad because of the circumstances surrounding it. And the comic I chose was a comic by Joe Lambert, Annie Sullivan, and Helen Keller book that he did, Center for Cartoon Studies, published by an imprint of Disney, actually, years ago. Now, this is a comic that it won an Eisner. It had a ton of at the time it came out. It had a ton of best of year. It got a lot of coverage in the comics world, that kind of thing. But I have had the sense that like because it is such a monumental achievement, and yet it isn't talked about in that way anymore or recently. Um, it did make me wonder if people kind of had forgotten about it. And I sat there in a room full of people, and none of them had read it,
Yeah,
and that's not a
I didn't know about it, so I'm
but I would say that and my I'm not going to go through the whole explanation of why because it does get me. That comic is sad on a beautiful level. um but it's like that comic is that rare mix of just nonstop formalist invention because Joe has the challenge of depicting how Helen Keller, someone who has no vision and no hearing, how does this person communicate with the world? And he takes her from this embryonic state of living in a world of total blackness, and by the end showing you how language develops while at the same time telling you this really beautiful story of Annie Sullivan's incredibly horrific and incredibly challenging life. And it's a book that pulls absolutely no punches when it comes to it doesn't have simple answers to anything. It questions relationship and truth and all these other things in this beautiful fashion. It uses the comics medium in a way that very few since or before had, um, successfully, incredibly. It's that classic thing that I think gets overused, but it's true with this book. It's a book. It's a thing that can only exist in this medium. Um, and the thing that I did bring up and it set me there and makes me still sad now. Outside of the context of what's in that book that makes it sad, what's sad is that he did all that, and it had all this acclaim at the time, and he doesn't make comics anymore. And I don't know why. I've heard hearsay reasons that I'm not going to repeat, but either way, he doesn't make things anymore. He stopped. He hit the mountaintop and he doesn't make things anymore. And the other things that's sad is that now we live 2026 is a time there's tons of nonfiction comics. There's tons of biographies made by all measure of publishers, and there's a lot of money poured into it. And not a single one of them grapples with the medium the way that book did. They just are explainers. They're just comics that deliver information. And I'm not talking about memoir. Memoir is different. I'm talking about nonfiction biography. And that particular comic should cast a larger shadow. Um, because when you talk about Mao's has had its day in court, and that day in court continues. It's an influence. Its influence is felt. Chris Ware's work, the influence is felt. Jaime's work, the influence is felt. Joe
Right.
Lambert's work in that comic should be, and it should be something that more people are impacted by, especially people who make comics, especially people who publish comics. And despite the fact that it had financial, I'm sure, probably not the level of success Disney might have wanted at the time, despite the fact that it got out to a lot of people and had two editions, it still just isn't talked about enough. And it should be.
Well,
So,
I literally just bought it. So the next time we get together, we'll
yeah,
talk about it.
it's a great book, great book. Fantastic. And it's funny too, because like you never saw it coming. If you saw his comics before that Secret Acres put out and I Will Bite You, it's not like you looked at that book and you're like, oh, this guy's gonna go like the pivot to doing a dual biography of Helen Keller and Andy Sullivan is a pivot. That's a pivot. That guy made
Right.
such a switch. So that's my book. That's the thing. I think more people should read it.
Yeah, I know a couple of the other books in the series
Yep.
because
The
I own
Porcelina.
Satchel
Yeah.
Paige striking
Of
out
course. Yeah.
Jim
Yeah.
Crow.
The
I
Crow.
think I have Houdini somewhere, The Handcuff King, but
The
I
Nick
don't know if I've
Bertozzi book.
actually
Yeah.
read it.
That's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very fun. Bertozzi's very good at drawing movement, and like he draws things in a way that when you remember them, it's like Jason Shiga. It's you remember them
Yeah.
as if you saw them happen, and it's like no, that
Right.
was a drawing. Like that was a
Right.
those were static images that he and Bertozzi's very good at that. I wish there was more Nick Bertozzi comics where he did that. I wish there were just more Nick Bertozzi comics. He's very talented.
Well, Tucker, it has been a pleasure. Hopefully this is
Yeah.
something we do again.
Hmm.
Hopefully we find time to just hang out because I enjoyed chatting with you. Um, for Tucker Stone of 12 or Fan of Graphics, this has been 22 panels, and we will see you after the next page.